Namaste and welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. I am Roshan Cariappa. I have with me Abhishek Paul as well to run you through the news and events of the week that was. I think it was slim pickings this week, I should say, but there were a few interesting slash controversial things that happened. First up, we look at Rahul Gandhi's remarks on OBCs. Then there were projects worth about 32,000 crores that have been sanctioned for Jammu and Kashmir. There was the unfortunate case of the arrest of a reporter in West Bengal, and we'll talk about the chaos that is ensuing there. And the silver fox is back in the news. Dr. S. J Shankar will bring you some of his latest hits, some fabulous remarks in Munich and elsewhere. All of this and more on this weekly. If this is your first time tuning into the podcast, we publish episodes on politics, policy, and culture. Do follow or subscribe to us on your favorite platform so you can stay updated. All right, let's get to it. Of late, Rahul Gandhi's strategy on his Bharat Jodo Nyay Yatra has shifted from making himself a meme to making himself the face of a slew of controversies. Last week, he claimed that Prime Minister Modi does not belong to the OBC community and was faking it for the rest of the world. Earlier this week, in yet another speech, he derogatorily referred to Aishwarya Rai, the actress, as a Nachne Wali Aurat, while trying to claim that Ram Mandir was a stunt for Prime Minister Modi and his, to quote, rich friends. This past week, he went on to call the youth of UP drunk and addicted and called them jobless while passing through his former constituency, Amethi. Prime Minister Modi, in a rally at Varanasi, slammed Rahul Gandhi for his demoralizing speech about the youth, while Ms. Smriti Irani challenged the Sion of Congress to contest Lok Sabha from the Amethi constituency. So, Abhishek, it seems like the desperation is kind of showing at this point of time, right? We had exit polls come up in December of last year that showed Prime Minister Modi and the NDA as clear favorites in the upcoming election. Rahul Gandhi, as we all know, has been on the Bharat Jodo Yatra for a year, and then the Nyay Yatra as well, and has been making interesting comments in a few different places. What do you think of this? I mean, is it political acumen or is it a desperation, as I mentioned a while back?
It could be desperation, but I suppose it seems like a part of an overall concerted strategy by Congress, right? So when it talks about the caste census to be done at a national level, and then it almost seems like he wants to do some sort of very elaborate top-down planning, right? Where when he says "Jitni abadi utna hak," which means that basically he will sort of do some sort of micro reservations, right? Like every community gets exactly the proportion of its share in population and so on. So some sort of elaborate social engineering project is in his mind, and that's what their strategy seems to be, right? Because over the last, let's say, couple of decades, the BJP has become a sort of much more broad-based party, right? It can no longer be called the party of the upper class or upper castes. It's no longer the Brahmin Banya party, right? So it is a party of, which sort of represents or is represented by all castes of within the Hindu side, right? Maybe it doesn't have uh, a sort of great representation of some of the dominant landed castes in a few states, but other than that, BJP is a pretty sort of broad spectrum party, and I think Congress and Rahul Gandhi has probably identified that this caste census and talking about you know uh, basically this is an attempt to break up that large umbrella coalition, right? Trying to find chinks in that armor and somehow get votes, or at least reduce the BJP's appeal among certain sections who can be sort of projected as victims, or you can sort of bring about that narrative. And I think another thing is that his tone seems to have changed, right? He's no longer trying to project a very sort of nice, affable image. He's become a lot more aggressive in his demeanor, in his language. And as you said, right, like he's talking, shouting down at random people in the audience, trying to make a point, right? Or even it seems he brings about the name of Aishwarya Rai quite often in his speeches. So yeah, I think it does seem like a sort of uh, more darker portrayal of his image and what he wants to sort of showcase, right? So it's a pretty aggressive stance in that sense.
Yeah, so I go back to episode number 31 of Bharatvaarta, where we discussed the way forward for the Indian National Congress, and this was with Ashish Chandorkar, Rohit Jaraman, and I think Bodhi. And you know, Rohit made two very interesting points at that point of time that's kind of played out, right? Which is that one, Congress is a collection of satraps at this point of time, right? Local political powers. And the second, that Rahul Gandhi was, not the pappu that we all thought he is, right? I mean, a person who's been thrust into a role that he is not capable of or interested in, but rather has some pretty dangerous designs, right? He has strong convictions on the social front that he would love to sort of implement, right? And this week has been a case in point, I should say, right? Because look at what he has suggested. He has suggested a census based on what caste owns how much wealth, right? What is the extension of that, right? Extension of that is some kind of a Stasi style re-engineering of sorts, right? I mean, distribution of wealth and assets, because that is really what we're getting at. And this kind of thing, what worries me is there is a section of the population for whom this has a bit of a seductive appeal, right, where things are going to be set right. I kind of think of demonetization as much as it was Prime Minister Modi's charisma. It was also the fact that, hey, irrespective of social or economic class, everybody was equally disadvantaged for a brief period of time. Was also something that people kind of understood and tolerated the broader sort of a policy change, I would say, right? So I'm really afraid of this. I'm actually like, uh, yeah, I'm actually convinced that this could be like evil, right? I mean, this could take us set us back. I mean, 20-30 years. I feel, right. So I really hope that people are able to recognize the just the sheer evil in these designs, and don't really fall for this. India is on an upsurge right now, and I hope that we keep it going. Yeah. All right. Speaking of an upsurge, on 20th February, Prime Minister Modi spearheaded a momentous event in Jammu. He inaugurated a slew of development projects worth rupees 32,000 crores. These projects span various critical sectors such as health, education, transportation, and infrastructure. Some of these projects include the AIMS Jammu for pioneering healthcare, the expansion of the Jammu airport, advancing rail and road connectivity, the CUF petroleum depot, so on and so forth to foster infrastructure. Prime Minister Modi also engaged with the beneficiaries of the diverse government schemes under the Viksit Bharat, Viksit Jammu initiative. Um, so Abhishek, since the repeal of the 370, we've seen a steady integration of Jammu and Kashmir into the main fold, right? And I don't think we could have kind of imagined the depth up to which this would have happened even about a year back. But this is fantastic. I mean, Prime Minister Modi is doing what he does best, which is, infrastructure, social welfare, so on and so forth at the last mile. So yeah, positive signs.
Yeah, but I would just give a caveat that I think the Supreme Court has directed that state level elections need to be held soon, right? I think they gave a certain deadline. I don't remember the date, but uh, I'm kind of curious to see what happens, whether the momentum that has been built during this, let's say, central rule, does it stay, or does Kashmir once again, fall back into previous patterns, right? Of let's say corruption and even sort of soft support for insurgency and so on, right? So because the moment law and order sort of passes back into the state administration, then things can once again become dicey. So I think that period is to be watched pretty closely.
Let's hope there is, an overlap on the policy and the politics at the, the state and the center, right? And both of these function in the interest of the people, right? All right. Earlier this month, hundreds of women in Sandeshkhali took to the streets to protest against land grabbing and non-payment of wages and sexual violence. This is in West Bengal, of course. Um the Republic Bangla journalist Santu Pan visited Sandeshkhali to report the alleged rapes and sexual exploitation by TMC member Sheikh Shahjahan and his aides Shiba Hazrat and Uttam Sardar. On Tuesday, the reporter was forcefully arrested on cooked up charges and put in prison. He was granted bail on Thursday by the Calcutta High Court after a marathon hearing where senior counsel Mahesh Jethmalani ji argued for Republic TV. The Calcutta court then came down heavily on the TMC government, asking why the FIR shouldn't be quashed as the allegations were unclear. The court added, saying to quote, feel sorry for police officers. You have not been able to arrest real culprits. You're after an innocent journalist while the people who are not caught are making a mockery of the law. Uh, Abhishek, again, West Bengal seems like a whole other planet in itself, right? A complete breakdown of law and order. Yeah, how do you see this sort of progressing?
Yeah, I mean, this has been happening repeatedly, at least in the last decade, right? Since TMC has been in rule. I think folks who follow a bit of West Bengal politics will recall, I think, places like Malda, etc., being repeatedly in news, right? Because of communal violence or communal clashes. And yeah, I think this one is another one of those egregious examples where the sort of local TMC leadership is basically running rampant, right, on poor and sort of poor villagers, basically, who don't have any support. Sandeshkhali is basically like a bit of an island, right? It is completely landlocked, and you need to, take boats to reach there. So it's sort of cut off from mainstream Bengal, and I mean, it probably took a lot of atrocities for the local people to even, bring up their courage to sort of protest widely, and finally sort of caught some sort of attention of the national media. But I don't think it is sort of really impacting any. I don't know, like, if it is impacting any change among the TMC voting public, especially in Kolkata, right? I mean, TMC gains a lot of its support in and around the Kolkata region, right, where the educated, so-called educated population of West Bengal, or the most educated sections of West Bengal resides, right? But they seem to have a total domination there. I mean, I think the fact that the BJP continues to be perceived as a party of outsiders basically plays into that, right? It's one of those things you see in quite a few states, right? So, unless that perception changes, um, I don't see much hope. I think, I mean, BJP sort of gained good ground in the 2019 elections and was pretty good pretty good contention for the assembly election after that, right? But it kind of regressed. The TMC increased its dominance, right? And so I think 2024 elections will probably be a good check to see if there is any change in the sentiments of the overall population of West Bengal. But otherwise, the situation remains pretty bad.
So, just a follow up question on that, right? I mean, the communists have not been in power in Bengal for quite a while now, right? And I think the last elections there was this whole talk of an alliance between the BJP and the communists, right? I mean, like a Ram and a Vam sort of at least a soft alliance. Is that something that is a viable political force in your opinion, or do you think that that experiment kind of didn't pan out the way one would have hoped?
I mean, I would say it was not really. I don't think the two parties talk to each other, right? It was more of a case that one hoped that the entire left vote bank would collapse, or the left vote share would collapse and get added to the BJP side, right? And probably did not happen fully, which kind of means that the left front still sort of remained alive and probably is trying to make a comeback again. The TNC tends to get, very high vote share, right? In the high 40s, for example. So to defeat the TMC, you will need to make it a sort of very binary contest and then, pull ahead. So yeah, I think probably it's the Congress party which has become most marginalized or reduced in prominence over the years. The CPM will struggle to win seats, obviously, again in the Lok Sabha, but it does retain a sort of small but loyal vote base still, I think.
Over the past week, Dr. S. J Shankar, the External Affairs Minister, has been making headlines repeatedly for his typically clever and witty remarks at various public forums. At the Munich Security Conference with the US Secretary of State and Germany's Annalena Baerbock, Dr. J Shankar said that the world should admire India for keeping multiple options open when questioned about India's ties with Russia. Later, at the Europe Business and Sustainability Conclave, he quipped, "In this country, we know when democracies work. We re elect governments," in response to his Estonian counterpart. He has defended India's ties and expressed support to Russia multiple times over the past week at various venues, saying, to quote, "Russia never hurt Indian interests while the West supplied weapons to Pakistan." He also urged other Asian countries to open up to Russia and said pushing a country to fewer and fewer options will not yield balanced results to anybody. At the Raisina dialogues that are ongoing, he took a jab at China while talking about UNSC reforms and said it is not the Western powers that oppose them. He has been championing India's aggressive pursuit of a UN permanent member seat with Saudi Arabia and, of course, Elon Musk expressing support. So, Abhishek, the greatest hits continue, right? The dynamic Dr. Jaishankar continues to amaze people. I especially liked the remarks he made with Antony Blinken, right? Because I think the question itself was posed in a very clever way, saying that earlier you guys were non-aligned, and now I think something like all aligned or something of that sort, right? And a very deft handling of that question, where he said that I'm just keeping my options open, and you should appreciate how smart I am for doing that. Being very explicit about that in a way, right? So if you go back, I think, to the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, he would often quote statistics on how much oil or gas or coal that the European Union was sort of importing from Russia, and then comparing it to India, saying that, hey, we haven't really done as much, right? But now, of course, I mean, things have caught up. But yeah, he seems to be fairly explicit now at this point of time, saying that hey, we have to do what's in the interest of our demographic, right? And we are not anti-West. We could be non-West, which is different, right? What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think the problem we have is, uh, let's say, 50% of the population in the Western countries, or maybe more, uh, look at Russia as pure evil. Uh, and interestingly, that has flipped completely in the last decade and a half, right? I mean, in the Cold War era, it was the Republicans who were the big, anti-communists, anti-Soviets, right? While it was the left in the US which maybe had some sympathies, right, for Soviet Union. Today, it is the complete opposite, right? It is the right which has some sympathies with Tucker Carlson visiting Russia and all that, while the liberal side of it has become, completely anti-Russia, right? Uh, and so this, India's stance is looked at, really badly by at least 50% of the West. I think, Anthony Blinken is probably a very polite guy. He sort of smiles along when he's hit with these statements. But I think probably internally he squirms a lot about all
Well, no
this.
one can make
But
him
yeah, I think
squirm as much as Biden does, right?
right. So yeah, I mean, this is anyway the last year of their administration, and then we'll have to see, what happens with uh, the elections there. I think the election there is totally up in the air, right? I mean, these are like two really old people having a lot of issues that they are dealing with, like health issues. Trump has his further legal troubles. He's got like a 350 million fine now. So all sorts of chaos is happening in the domestic scene. So probably I think uh, we have like one good year of probably uh, peace on this front, and then there could be a lot of reset happening once the new administration comes in. But yeah, I think India's made its point pretty clear. I mean, one of the earlier speeches of J Shankar is something I recall, right, where he said that I am trying to get what is best for India, right? The Americans have basically cut out the Iranian oil, Venezuelan oil from the market, right? So you have cut out supply. You have squeezed out the supply. So I am now trying to get the best price from Russia. It's not like we want Russian oil because we like Russian oil, right? We are trying to see what is best available in the market. So yeah, I think one other interesting thing he talked about is India is also not completely transactional, right? Basically saying that our past relation with Russia also matters. So there is some sentiment also involved, right? The Russians have not screwed us over like the West has in the past. So India also values that in its relationship with Russia. I mean, he kind of made that clear to the audience there.
Yeah. Well, I think we should definitely do an episode on the US elections, perhaps, in a couple of months or so when things get a little more clear, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to wait till we know who's running, because I've been listening to some podcasts trying to get back into the flow of things, US politics. I've not been following it for a while now. And what I seem to think is like a lot of Democrats feel that it's time for Biden to go, and they're trying to, but he's there. There is no credible opposition in the primaries, right? So they are trying, or they are discussing scenarios of how he could sort of step down, and they could have candidates nominated at the convention and things like that, right? So it'll be interesting to see what call he takes.
I think the four people in the race right now: Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, President Biden, and then Gavin Newsom. Right? I mean, these are the four in the mix, at least at this point of time. But
Yeah, I mean, Newsom is unofficial, right? He's obviously not going to say anything till Biden pulls out. But yeah, I mean, unofficially, if Biden does pull out, he becomes the favorite.
well, interesting times for sure. With that, we come to the end of this Bharatvaarta Weekly. I hope you liked the content. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We have a couple of exciting episodes coming up. As I mentioned earlier, we have the historian Abbas Maldiyar on the podcast. He's going to be talking about his new book, Babar, the Chessboard King. And there have been a few interesting remarks, articles, chatter on Twitter, etc., on the book itself. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him. We also have another prominent voice on Twitter at Center of Right, or Vijay, as he's known. Someone who is very sane on current affairs, politics, and policy, and so on and so forth. I'll be having a chat with him as well. Let us know if there are guests that we should invite, and there are topics that we should cover. We'd love to hear your suggestions. We're at Bharatvaarta on all social media platforms. Until then, thank you so much for joining us on this weekly. From Abhishek and myself, do stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.